Oh, sorry. Hold on. I gotta do this thing. All right. Hello and welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me because I don't know. So I'm Greg Magofnia. I want to welcome you to the beautiful Huntington Beach Pier, where we're not underwater, we are in the tube, as I've learned. Speaking of in the tube, some of you are joining us on the YouTube, so thank you. Really quickly, as all you YouTubers know, I want you to smash that like and subscribe button right now. All right, so welcome to CaRLA's Huntington Beach Chit Chat. This is our Huntington Beach Bonanza, and brought to you by CaRLA. And for those of you who don't know what CaRLA does, basically, we sue rich cities to make sure that they make space for more Californians. Speaking of, and to join me in this chat, I'm going to introduce you to my friends, Sick Surfer Bro Dylan Casey, who is our executive director. Dylan Casey, would you like to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our show today, and we're going to answer some questions about Huntington Beach. Excited.
Okay, thank you so much. And then Sick City Surfer Victoria Fierce.
Hello. Hi. People probably know me.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, everyone. So I want to say that if you're in YouTube, feel free to ask questions. You can put it in the chat. A streamer pro tip that I've learned is I am now asking you, whoever's watching, to say hello in the chat so that we can chat with you. Otherwise, if you're following us, you can always ask us a question on Twitter. You can find us at CaRLA_org, at CaRLA_org. And then if you're ready, grab your Mai Tai, because we are going to have a gnarly conversation about Huntington Beach. So, all right. Okay, so let's start with a question about what this Huntington Beach saga is. And it's interesting because we've actually referred to it as a saga, and we've been getting press inquiries using specifically the word saga. So Victoria, why don't you give us a quick overview of this case, like when it started and some milestones along the way?
Yeah, so it's a project. It's been a couple of years in the making. This is down in Huntington Beach, and a few years ago, a developer put forward a proposal to build housing. Obviously, it's how all these stories start out, and it had a lot of pushback, as you might expect, in Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach being a place that elected Tito Ortiz of all places, yeah, so it went to the planning commission, went to city council, and they voted it down, even though we sent them a letter, which usually stops these things, but they didn't listen to us anyways, because why would they? And then we sued. And so we went to court. And then we originally lost it in court, and Dylan's going to talk a bit more about that. And then we won, and here we're at right now. Yeah, so yeah, Dylan, what's like the procedural history about that?
So it has been a long process for a lot of different reasons. Like you said, the first time the city denied it, we submitted a letter. The city actually brought it back, the development back for another hearing. And 2 days before that hearing, they produced these expert reports that showed some sort of health and safety impact that the project was supposedly going to impose on the surrounding area. Basically, the only real impact that they showed was that people in the development would have some cars, and those cars might get in an accident somewhere. And as you can imagine, if that's going to be a health and safety impact that can justify denial of housing, you're in big trouble in California. So after that, we filed our lawsuit and had a lot of delays due to the court shutting down for a period of time due to COVID, and eventually we got everything briefed and argued and got a decision against us. Fortunately, shortly after that time, we got our decision in another one of our lawsuits, San Mateo, which was a Court of Appeals decision, which contradicted a lot of what the judge in Huntington Beach said. And we filed a motion in Huntington Beach to get the judge to revisit her decision, and were able to succeed in that motion. That's how we won the trial court. Even after that, the city filed another motion to get the judge to reconsider again, which was unsuccessful. And now the city has decided to appeal the motion that came out in their favor. And they filed a notice of appeal just recently. And that's where we are today. We're getting ready to go to the Court of Appeals again to defend housing.
Yeah, the city wasn't too happy with the fact that we won, despite the fact that the judge made their first overturning of their own ruling, as far as we can tell, in their entire career. Very unusual. And yet the city, being the city of Huntington Beach, looks at that and says, oh yeah, no, we can take it on.
All right, well, we're going to get into that some more. So make sure you have your drinks ready. I just want to shout out to some people in the YouTube chat, and Dem. I'm sure that's an Urban Future Democrat. Oh, I know. Hello, John. David. So hello to all of you. So let's talk a little bit about Huntington Beach. So I hear that they're very good with social media. So Dylan, why don't you give me a little context to place this case?
I believe you're referring to a specific Facebook group. There is a particularly active, large Facebook group that is that talks about current events in Huntington Beach and has its own political bent to it. They are very vocal supporters of a effort to recall every one of the city council except for one, mostly on the basis that the council is too pro-housing. This is the same city council that voted down this project and also took a number of actions over the years to constrain housing. So the politics in the city are not housing as they currently are, at least. And as a result, the city has kind of been a habitual violator of state housing laws. Before this case was even brought, the city tried to downzone an area that it had designated for high density development as part of its previous housing element, and was sued by the Kennedy Commission, a local advocacy group, and eventually the state to get that downzoning overturned. And they were successful. And that actual area of the city is where this project is located. So this is actually located in an area of the city in their previous housing element had decided was where they're going to put the high density development, but they're still trying to deny housing. So we're just trying to make the city realize that they don't need to let local politics get in the way of housing because state law tells them they can do that. And I think eventually they'll realize it. We'll see how long it takes.
Okay, so why don't you tell me a little bit more about why we chose Huntington Beach? What is the backstory on this special district, and what's going on with their housing element? I think we have a question. Does anyone believe that Huntington Beach is 1,500 homes now in the process of being built or approved? I don't know, Dylan.
I don't know about that. I mean, hypothetically, yes, but there's such an effort to disobey state housing law however they can that I am skeptical that those type of numbers will ever actually turn into people's homes. Like I said, the specific plan was enacted according to the previous housing element, which is part of the city's plan to meet their quota or their regional housing needs. And they enacted a specific plan, and it was very controversial. Several years ago, about halfway through the planning cycle, they voted to cut the density of that plan in half. They cut the unit cap in half. And that's what they got sued over. And in the settlement, they designated a bunch of sites for higher density housing. This was not one of those particular sites, but it's very similarly situated. So if they deny the housing here, it seems like there's a good chance they'll deny any high density housing that they proposed in that settlement.
Great. Okay, so Dylan has given us a lot of background. So Victoria, why don't you tell us a little bit about like why this project? Why did we go after them? Why does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, so you have to like look at that question in the context of our San Mateo case, because in San Mateo we basically solidified the constitutionality of the Housing Accountability Act, which is like step one to the law, or like one part of the law. The rest of the law itself is like what constitutes an objective standard, what's a health and safety threat, and those sorts of things. And San Mateo totally answered the question of what's an objective standard. We have a really good answer for that, and it's like if you've got 4 staffers giving 5 answers, that's not objective. But the question that like wasn't answered or even raised at all in that case is what's the health and safety impact for that, which is like kind of then this like kind of backdoor sort of loophole that cities maybe might be trying to take advantage of, which Huntington Beach is trying to do here. And so the reason this case is really important is because it directly answers that question. Like, what is a pre-written, objective, quantifiable health and safety threat? And in this case, specifically, it's kind of ridiculous because there's the project and it's at this intersection of these 2 big streets, and there's already really like a lot of crashes and traffic there at this intersection. And the city knows about this, and they in fact said it in their studies, their reports, and all that. But then they said, well, this project will just make it worse because people will start making an illegal U-turn to get into the project. And they're literally saying that people will break the law if we build this thing, which like makes you wonder who's in charge of deciding what is a broken law and who makes the laws that get broken. So it's a little weird. And that's what Huntington Beach is trying to argue is like, well, again, people will make an illegal U-turn, making an unsafe condition even more unsafe. And then the question is that a legal reason to deny it? And that's, one of the reasons that we took it on is, I mean, one, Huntington Beach has like been kind of very famous lately. It's in the papers. You probably heard about it, they've been like fighting the mask mandate. They've got some very strong like pro-Trump, anti-government sentiment down there. And then this comes along and it's like, wow, now we can just add housing to it. So we're going after them for that. It's like a perfect target.
I mean, I'm going to be honest, Victoria. The only laws we follow down here are the laws of physics and the tube. All right. So speaking of, so Dylan, why don't you tell me a little bit about this project in general? Victoria gave us what happened with just the case itself, but like, what was the process that this project had to go through? Did it have to go to a commission first? What did it go through before we picked it up?
Well, like I said, this area was designated for high density development in the specific plan, which means it does not have to do environmental analysis, which was allowed it to move pretty quickly through the permitting process. To give you a sense of the site, it's a bit of a deep, narrow site, a little bit off of the main intersection. And the building is situated kind of lengthwise down the site with a driveway going in, and it's 4 stories tall. I believe it's intended to be a condo development, and it has a handful of below market rate units to it too. It's really a pretty standard, like 100% compliant housing development. But unfortunately, city residents were just had enough of the type of housing development that we really need, and that Huntington Beach had planned for. And so it ran up into this kind of classic NIMBY opposition.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That is quite some background. All right. So which one of you surfer friends, I'm like surfer people, wants to tell me a little bit about what happened in our case? So what did we argue and what did they argue specifically?
Sure. Well, I think Victoria talked a little bit about how this case is moving beyond a question of like, does the Housing Accountability Act apply at all? And really getting into the question of what under the Housing Accountability Act is a significant health and safety impact that would justify a city in denying a bunch of housing. And beyond that, I think there is also some important questions of how the court decides that. What the HAA says is that the court needs to, it needs to defer to the proponent of housing, basically. The wording is different, but normally in these types of cases, courts are used to deferring to cities. But the HAA says that they need to do the opposite, that courts need to interpret the law in favor of the approval of housing. And if the city identifies a significant health and safety impact, they need to support that with a preponderance of the evidence. And so here it was just one expert hypothesizing that some people would make some U-turns and that those U-turns would result in accidents. And that was the entire basis for the denial. So as you can imagine, in other housing developments around the state, if that is a valid basis for denial, it'll basically give any city around the state a reason to deny whatever project they want, which we can't have. So that's why we sued here.
Those dangerous U-turns. So I think we kind of touched upon this, but Huntington Beach was an interesting case. Who wants to, maybe Victoria, you can talk about what happened between the first judgment and the second judgment, and maybe share with our friends down up at the bar over there, somewhere that way. What exactly happened? Like, what was the first ruling, and then what happened in the second ruling?
Yeah, so it's kind of amazing actually how it all turned out, right? Because like first Huntington Beach, we have our hearing, and at the same time we've still got our San Mateo appeal working its way through the courts, and we're coming up on we just had our San Mateo hearing. We hadn't had a ruling for it yet. And then we have our Huntington Beach ruling. And in that ruling, the judge said, well, the Housing Accountability Act doesn't really apply to charter cities. So we're just kind of like, there you go. That's the end of it. There's that. And then it was like literally like a week later, probably less than that we got a ruling in San Mateo, which said, actually, it does apply to charter cities. And further, here's other details about what that means. And because California is like a little weird about how law and precedent works, a trial court ruling doesn't really like apply statewide, but an appeals ruling does. And so when San Mateo came out, suddenly the Orange County Court had to listen to that ruling, and they had to say, oh, well, I guess it does actually apply. So this judge, who has been on the bench for like 20, 30 years or something, quite a long time, for the first time in their career on the bench, they overturned their ruling because the San Mateo ruling came out. We put in a motion for a new reconsideration based on that, to kind of like save the time of having to go through an entire other appeal. The judge looked at it and said, okay, you're right, you got it. So they overturned the ruling. They gave us another one that said, actually, CaRLA is right, and Huntington Beach can go pound sand. And then, yeah, the city was not very pleased about that, and they very quickly voted to allocate another $3.8 million of their city funds towards fighting lawsuits, which one city councilor said, we need to stop picking fights and losing them, immediately before voting to pick a fight and lose it.
Well, we never get tired of winning. So, Dylan, why don't you tell me, because I think I saw you in the courtroom that day. I had some extra time on a Friday morning. What happened after the judge put out her new ruling?
Well, after that, let's see, that was back in early October, I think, when the judge finally ruled in our favor. Well, in a case like that, normally the city would have a choice either to comply with the new ruling, which basically would say that the city needs to rehear the project and make a decision that is consistent with the Housing Accountability Act, which I think in this case would lead to an approval, or they can choose to appeal the ruling or some other effort to reconsider it. In this case, the Huntington Beach City Attorney opted to ask the judge to reconsider her reconsideration, but that did not. That was not successful. We opposed that and were successful. And so the original ruling in our favor, second ruling in our favor, was still enforced. And at this point, the City Council has voted in favor of an appeal, and they have filed a notice of appeal. So we expect the city is appealing the lawsuit, and we're going to be defending it, which, unlike that was not the case in San Mateo. So we should have an easier time in this case than we did in San Mateo. That's the hope, because we're defending the outcome of the trial court.
Yeah, all right. So I am having kombucha girl moments with all of these different judgments. So first, if I'm correct, went to the trial court favored the city, and we lost. And then we moved to reconsider. And then in that time, San Mateo came out, then the trial court reversed itself, and then Huntington Beach then asked for reconsideration of the reconsideration, and now they're going to appeal.
Yeah,
that's right. There's different names to all these motions, but that's basically what happened.
Cheers.
There's a lot of steps along the way.
Yeah, and again, like I said, this is like the first time in like the judge's career on the bench that they've ever granted a reconsideration, and the city is hoping that lightning strikes twice in the same case.
Okay, and I think you touched on this, but I'm busy getting water out of my ears. So why again, tell me, are appeals more important than trial court decisions, and why was San Mateo that consequential?
Because they apply statewide. So once we get an appeal, like a trial court ruling, you can't cite it in another case. So even if like up here in Berkeley, we had a case a long time ago, a couple years back, where the city said, here's what it means to find that a city acted in bad faith for denying of a project, and the HAA applies and a bunch of other stuff. But because it's a trial court ruling in California, can't cite it anywhere else. It doesn't apply except for essentially another HAA case going to that exact same set of circumstances. So when it goes to the appeals court, then that ruling applies statewide, which like there's some other like minor strange details about that, with like different districts of appeal, different courts of appeal, maybe disagreeing on things, and then the state Supreme Court jumps in, but we're hoping we don't get to that point.
Yeah, well, okay, so the appeals decisions matter more. They apply statewide. Cities take them more seriously because they have to, because they'll be sued again. So Dylan, what are we likely, what could be new and precedent setting in this appeal?
Before you answer that, John actually asked a really good
Before
question.
I answer that,
Is the appeals court bound to follow a previous decision by another appeals court? For the most part, yes.
Yeah, I think that's right. Although in this case, there may be some aspects of the questions on appeal that are covered by our case in San Mateo, but our case in San Mateo didn't consider what constitutes a health and safety impact that would justify denial. So that's going to be a kind of new territory for a court of appeals in California.
Okay, right. Okay. So I'm learning. I had too much time in the sun. So it goes trial court, appeals court, Supreme Court?
Yep.
California Supreme Court, yes.
And then the federal Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United States, if it comes down to it, which would be very expensive, but we're not there yet, thankfully.
Luckily, they do not decide state law questions, so there would need to be some sort of federal issue there.
Yeah, it'd be like a takings issue or something.
So we know that excuse me, I'm choking because all of this information, choking on lawsuits. So this case, Huntington Beach is appealing it, so now we're going to the appeals court, and if Huntington Beach loses, then they'll have to decide if they want to go to the Supreme Court, if I'm understanding correctly, which I am. Dylan, go ahead.
Let's not give them any ideas.
Well, why don't you tell me, I heard something about even going to an appeal. It's not just like the city just votes, there's something else they need to do. So, Victoria, I'm asking about a bond.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, so this is like the other fun thing. And this is something that happened in our Los Altos case. Which I'll explain what happened in Los Altos. So Los Altos, they denied a project and we sued them and won. And Los Altos, being Los Altos, was not too pleased with the result of that. And so they wanted another bite at the apple. And to do that, they, went through the process of starting to file an appeal. But there's this really cool little thing in the Housing Accountability Act, which, like, for some reason we didn't realize until the city had tried filing an appeal, that if a city wants to file an appeal wants to appeal a trial court ruling based on the HAA, the plaintiff in that case, which would be us, can request the judge to order the city to post bond. And the reason for that, and in Los Altos, I think is like we requested like $7 million, which is like 10% of their city budget. It would have been an entire department for them that they were gambling with. Which in that case, the city like immediately backed down and was like, all right, we give up. You guys win. And like the reason for that is like one of the big ways that cities fight housing is when they, if they get a bad ruling in court, cities have more money than God. They can simply raise taxes. They can just raise a bond and then just like raise money to pay off court fees forever. Developer can't do that. Developer has to like make things move. So the HAA allows us to request the city post a bond to kind of like force them to put some skin in the game, which we can't really say exactly what it is for our Huntington Beach case. But that is a possibility, is that we could, basically call the city's bluff and say like, okay, well, if you want to fight this, then you'll have to gamble away your entire Parks and Rec department. Are you comfortable with that? The thing about Huntington Beach is maybe they might be, which would be a scary thought, but that's a possibility that might be coming around. That's like a huge tool that we have, and that's how we won Los Altos so well, which like is very different than San Mateo, because in San Mateo we lost that first trial ruling, so we can't like just do that. We have to appeal it. If the city loses, there's an option there.
Yeah, and just to be clear on that, was so in Los Altos, the judge awarded, I think, $7 million. They ordered the city to post $7 million bond.
Yeah.
In order to cover, it's to cover the cost of delay associated with an appeal. Appeals usually take 1 to 2 years, probably more like 2 years. And really that is the developer's delay. We'd like to think about coming up with arguments about why it would cost CaRLA in terms of delay, but really it's money that is to cover the developer's costs associated with the delay. And so in this case, we'll see if we end up getting that from the judge.
Yeah, and like the cost of that is like taxes. Maybe you've got some loan financing that you got to pay off your payments on that, because like you're not making rent on it, you're not getting your return on it, those sorts of things. And those really do add up, and which is, again, goes back to cities. They've got more money than God. They can fight this. They know if they put the pressure on a developer's going to be like, well, we can either spend $2 million holding on to this, or we can just cave and give the city what they want, which inevitably means less housing.
All right. So, I mean, do we have any idea of what the city might be saying, say from the reconsideration?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about this. My view is that the appeal is going to center on whether the city established this sort of health and safety impact. But that being said, they brought up a bunch of other arguments in the trial court that think are less effectual, but they may still come up in appeal. Like they brought up the fact that they don't think the HAA should apply to charter cities, even though that is exactly the question that was settled in San Mateo. I wouldn't put it past the city to continue to argue that on appeal. Also, they argued that the court should just defer to cities' decisions about what constitutes health and safety impact and what housing complies with their standards. Again, at least the second part of that was decided by San Mateo, and the HAA is pretty clear that courts don't defer to cities. But they bring those arguments, and they might bring them again. So I think it's going to be about the health and safety impacts of the projects, but any of those issues really could come up.
Yeah, they're a bit of a wild card.
Yeah, I mean, I don't say thank you to San Mateo for much, but I remember in that reconsideration, they were like, we know we brought up San Mateo, but like, not like that. Like, don't use San Mateo against us. We brought it up, but we would have won if we didn't bring up San Mateo. But we are going to bring up San Mateo. But we would have won.
Yeah.
If you listen to the way we brought up San Mateo, not the way that you applied to. It was a fun thing.
It was super goofy.
So why don't you tell me about what are the implications for housing law should we lose this appeal?
I mean, they're not great. It kind of depends on how it gets lost, which is obviously not something we want to think about too much. We got to be prepared for it. So it kind of really depends on what arguments they might be making soon about the health and safety. I don't know, Dylan, I feel like we're pretty safe on the constitutionality parts of it. The appeals court ruling was just very, very ridiculously clear about it and feels very bulletproof. But again, this is the health and safety thing, the other parts of it. So obviously we don't want to lose a lawsuit.
And if we got a really bad decision, there's a number of ways that we could try to fix that too. Clearly in my mind, this is not a valid health and safety impact to deny a project. But if it were, you could imagine the legislature trying to fix that and clarify that is not what they intended when they enacted the HAA.
Mm-hmm.
And that would send a message to the courts. Or we could petition the state Supreme Court to take up the issue.
Yeah, I think that's actually one really important impact is even if we do lose, that still means that the law can be changed. And it points out a glaring vulnerability in this thing. Thinking from an engineering systems perspective, if there's a vulnerability in the firewall, we got to plug it, and the legislature would be more than happy to do so. Because the legislature can just overturn court precedent for the most part. They just pass a law and that's it. It's easy. I mean, of course, but.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting because the HAA is our weapon and our other weapon is SB 9. And, if you want to use that in the Los Altos Hills, you got to have your 40-foot setback. Which city has that 4 people hedge? Moving on. I'm not sure. We're going to have another one on SB 9 soon. Don't you worry. So why don't I ask you, both of you, how can we use this Huntington Beach case to move forward? Did I say it right? How are we moving forward? How does this sound? My virgin Mai Tai is really strong, so
it is almost the end of the day. That's why we did this. Yeah. We can use it as more evidence to the legislature of here's how things are broken, here's how things are flawed. We can also use it as an example to other cities. If you try and violate the law, we are coming for you and we are watching. And as I usually tell city councils, the question isn't between housing or no housing. The question is between housing and consequences, and we are the consequences.
Yeah, I think I'd just add that this court case has taken a long time. Anytime you go to the Court of Appeals, it takes a long time. the hope is that if we send enough of these messages to cities, they realize that they're not going to win if they try and make up reasons to deny housing on sites where they have said that housing is allowed, which is pretty simple. You'd think that would be a simple concept. If cities plan for housing on a site and someone proposes housing, they shouldn't just be able to deny that for any reason. And that's the basic concept behind the HAA. So we're hoping for a future where that is true in practice in California. And I think we're getting closer and closer to it.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think it's because of CaRLA's work that objective standards are a thing, that are enforceable. And thank you to Dave and Ann for telling me it is Los Altos Hills. And maybe, I don't know, we might have objective standards soon about cutting those hedges into animal shapes, and that won't be allowed. Okay, well, I think we are coming to a close on this. So now, any last words, Victoria or Dylan, on Huntington Beach, or just kind of what CaRLA's looking at for the future?
I think it's really hilarious, actually, that a lot of the city council in Huntington Beach right now is subject to recall for being too pro-housing, despite the fact that they voted this down.
Yeah, I hope Huntington Beach is a bit of an outlier with their local housing politics. I think there's a lot of cities that are trending in the opposite direction. Berkeley's a good example. But certainly Huntington Beach is not going in that direction. But aside from that, just generally our work at CaRLA, we have a lot of new laws coming into effect, mostly SB 9, and we are watching what cities are doing with that. Similar to how we've been watching what cities are doing with the ADU laws that went into effect at the beginning of 2020. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on making sure cities implement all these laws the way the legislature intended. And that's what we're going to be working on the next year and months.
Yep. January 1st, SB 9 takes effect, and we are ready to go.
Yeah, and we're also watching what cities are doing with the lawsuits we've already won, like Los Altos, trying to pay almost $1 million to get rid of affordable housing. So Los Altos and Los Altos Hills, get it together. All right, so other announcements about things coming up. We have our gala in December. Victoria, would you mind telling us a little bit about this?
Yeah, things are still in the works, but it's going to be another fun virtual one like we did last year, if you saw it. If not, go check out our YouTube channel. We got an archive of it on there. We are working on getting speakers and figuring out what's a good date that works for everybody, but expect it to be around it's definitely going to be before Christmas, probably like the week or a week or two before that. I wish we had a date, but we don't have one yet, so that's coming up soon. We'll have some cool panels and discussion and some cool celebrities and fun stuff, and it'll be super fun. We might even have like a raffle during it, which is really cool, and some sponsors. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be coming out soon. Very excited still. I mean, yeah, as soon as we have a date, we'll let you know, but make sure you make time for a nice afternoon fun event stream thing, possibly on a weekend or weekday.
All right, great. So thank you for joining us. If you would like to see us IRL and check out our nice tans and Dylan's surfboard, you can find us tomorrow at the California YIMBY event. California YIMBY has been an important partner to us, partnership, passing the laws, enforcing the laws. But otherwise, I'm going to invite you to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you later.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. We'll let you know we're going to do more of this stuff. So
thanks everyone for tuning in.
yeah, good to see everybody. Glad to have you.